So thank you for that. And with that, I'd like to welcome everyone to this special budget meeting for 2021. We have basically one item. We're going to discuss the budget and approve it here this night. So are there any disclosures of pecuniary or conflict of interest? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, I understand that you have some notes from one of our constituents that you'll be reading into the minutes. I guess you can do so at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have comments received from Rob Cosby in regards to the 2021 budget presentation. Good evening, Mayor Balsma, councilors, and township staff. I have reviewed the 2021 budget documents online and also attended virtually the budget meeting held on February 16, 2021. Overall, I'm comfortable with the current budget with an increase of approximately 2.8% over 2020. This is a smaller increase than last year and still takes into consideration the maintaining of service levels while accounting for inflationary costs. Discussion occurred during the budget meeting regarding the initiation of a levy to raise funds for the township's funding commitment to the new Wesleyan Memorial Hospital. My opinion is that we, as a township, should begin setting aside funds this year. Spreading out the raising of these funds over 5 years instead of 4 years will result in a smaller impact to residents each year. I would like to make a few comments/concerns for your consideration this evening. These are in no particular order. Firstly, Public Works truck purchases. The budget proposes the schedule replacement of tandem number 34, as well as moving up from 2022, the schedule replacement of tandem number 35, and the addition to the fleet of a second single axle truck with plow. The rationale to compensate for manufacturing and delivery delays in the heavy truck and equipment industry and to allow for the potential for better pricing considerations when tendering for multiple pieces at the same time. I agree with better pricing considerations when tendering for multiple pieces at the same time. I agree with this rationale, but after some thought, I have two concerns. The township is currently waiting for delivery of 3 trucks relating to the 2019 and 2020 capital budgets, and the current request is for 3 more trucks in this 2021 budget. This will result in 6 trucks, roughly half of the heavy fleet, due for replacement over a 3-year period in approximately 10 years, based on the current practice of a 10-year replacement program. Will this put an undue stress on reserves in 10 years when this many trucks will need to be retired, or will some need to be kept in service longer due to the ramifications of this decision? My second concern is with the additional single axle plow truck. I had a very good discussion on various topics with the Public Works Manager, Steve McGean, late in 2019. The topic of the additional single axle plow truck for the urban area came up, and I totally agreed that the urban area was grossly underserviced with only 1 truck for winter operations. I still agree that an additional piece of equipment is badly needed, but I wonder, when I look at the very cramped nature of all of the newer existing and planned developments in Smithville, whether a conventional single axle plow truck is still practical, or if a piece of equipment that is more agile and maneuverable might be an option. Maybe this could be a multi-use piece of equipment that could also be used for a different use in the summer months. Fire department. I support the addition of a firefighter position over the next 2 years. Chief Fisher stated that the complement of firefighters had not been increased for several years. I believe that it is beneficial to have a larger number of volunteer firefighters on the department to draw on as the municipality grows and calls are likely to increase. The fire department is scheduled to replace both of its tankers, first this year and the other in 2022. Using the same rationale as the Public Works Department, why don't we entertain the idea of moving up next year's tanker replacement to this year? It will be likely that either of these tankers would be delivered until late 2022 or early 2023, and there could be a potential for cost savings as well. The replacement of both of these tankers was pushed back by 2 years during the 2018 budget process, according to my notes. Both of these tankers, although serving the municipality well, are beyond 20 years of age when replacement is highly suggested by the province. West Lincoln Fire Department is also currently unable to obtain shuttle certification until our tankers are replaced with new units. Shuttle certification of a municipality is viewed by some insurance companies as a lower risk when quoting residential insurance premiums. Conversion of gravel roads to tar and chip surface. I wish to thank Township Council and staff for resuming the project of upgrading gravel roads to tar and chip surface. This initiative began several decades ago when virtually all of our rural roads were gravel. Despite this initiative being on hiatus for several years due to lack of support from councils of the day, our township has progressed to the point where, according to inventories from the latest road assessment, over 60% of our rural roads are now tar and chip. My hope is this initiative will continue into the future, allowing more residents the benefit of better rural roads. Operating budget, unpaved roads. Our remaining gravel roads have been in need of major improvements for many years. Many residents have commented for several years regarding the condition of our mud roads. I had not had the opportunity to experience the full reality of the term mud road until this past October, when the gravel roads in my immediate area became mud. Councillor Gannan made mention of this during the February 16th budget meeting. Our roads were graded, and that evening we received 12 millimeters of rain. The next day, our roads were almost impossible to drive on, a soupy mess that created ruts at least a couple of inches deep on parts of South Grimsby Road 3 and Concession 7 Road. These roads were defined to be in very good condition in the recent road assessment. The road eventually dried out, but some of the ruts are still visible today. I would expect a gravel road to be soft after rainfall on a newly graded road. However, it is my opinion that this problem was so severe for two reasons. Normally, gravel roads are built from granular A, which is a blend of materials from screening up to 3/4 inch gravel. This blend compacts quite well and is very stable. Our road does not appear to have enough of the larger gravel remaining in the roadbed. We are left with larger percentages of smaller gravel screenings, which does not compact well in very wet conditions. The larger the stones from the roads breaks down over time from normal use, as well as being thrown from the gravel part of the roadway due to traffic and sometimes from snow plowing. On some portions of the road in my immediate area, the road shoulders are higher than the travel portion of the roadway, which prevents the drainage of rainfall to roadside ditches. This results in ponding, erosion where water runs down the road, and muddy roads. I believe that the above problems are common on most gravel roads in our municipality. The budget for maintenance of unpaved roads shows a 2% increase, and now that one of the local quarries has increased the prices of aggregates by 3% for 2021, I would also like to note that in the 2018 budget document, the amount budgeted for maintenance of unpaved road was reduced by 10.8%. I'd request that the Township of West Lincoln increase the level of funding for additional gravel roads to be applied to unpaved roads to bring them up to a higher standard than what currently exists in our municipalities. Thank you for your time and consideration. Rob Cosby, 5969 Concession 7 Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And our thanks also to Mr. Cosby, who has participated very diligently and faithfully over the years to this budget process. At this time, we have No others. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? Okay, yeah, all right. Then we're going to move on to other business. And we have a motion before us. I see that it's been moved by Councillor Bradrick. So Councillor Bradrick, if you could read that, then we'll get a seconder. We'll put this on the floor, and then we'll probably be going to our treasurer for a presentation.
Moved by myself, Councillor Shelley Bradrick, that report T-07-2021 regarding the 2021 operating and capital budget final report dated March 1st, 2021 be received, and that a tax levy of $8,054,840, which represents a 5.68% tax levy increase after factoring in assessment growth, be approved, and that a new tax levy of $75,300 for the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital rebuild, in addition to the amount in item 2, for a total 2021 tax levy of $8,130,140 be approved, and that the detailed 2021 capital program attached as schedules H to N to this report totaling $5,866,500 be approved, and that water and watershed user fees increase on July 1st, 2021 as follows: 5% increase to the water consumption rate, the water base charge, the wastewater base charge, the water filling station consumption rate, and a 2% increase to the wastewater consumption rate, and that a bylaw be passed which amends bylaw 2004-42 schedules A and C to incorporate the revised water and wastewater fees affected July 1st, 2021, and that council delegate authority to the CAO to approve in year 2021 budget amendments up to a $20,000 per item, and to report to council on a monthly basis regarding such amendments, and that the balance of capital and special projects for the years 2022 to 2030 as outlined on schedules F and G to this report be approved in principle, and that tangible capital asset amortization expense estimated at $3,158,800 and post-employment expense estimated at $4,000 be and are hereby excluded from the 2021 draft operating and capital budget as permitted through regulation 248/09.
Thank you, Councillor Bradrick. Can I get a seconder, please? And Councillor Ganand, thank you very much. This is on the table. At this point, I'm going to go over to our Director of Finance, Ms. Donna DeFilippis. I don't know if you want to lead out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bilsma. I do not have a formal presentation this evening, as at the meeting on February 16th, Council and the public received the full presentation of the 2021 budget, and presented in this report on March 1st. It's the same base budget, base levy of $8,054,840. However, the change that has happened is the levy for the West Lincoln Hospital rebuild is being proposed at $75,300. And that is lower than what you saw at the February meeting. And that's because the requirement is now being spread over 5 years as opposed to 4 years. At the February 16th meeting, it was also requested that the two items could be separated. So for some reason, council did not want to include the hospital levy in the 2021 budget, they could. So if council does not want to do that, it's recommendation number 3, they just would not pass, because that's the one that deals with the hospital levy. I want to highlight charts 2 and charts 4 in the budget report, because they help break down for council the impact of the levy on the West Lincoln portion of the taxes and on the overall tax bill. So if we include the hospital levy, you would be looking at chart number 4, which would result in an overall tax bill increase of 3.10% for an average home assessed at $382,397. And again, that's MPAC's assessment based on 2016 when they did the last evaluations. Council is looking at an annual tax increase total bill of approximately $135.79 or $11.32 a month.
Well, thank you for that recap, Director. Kind of gives us a good refresh. So I'm opening up the floor to discussion. Are there any councilors who, Councilor Rayner? And you're on mute, sir.
I do this all the time. Jason didn't catch me this time, though. You're ahead of him.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, Donna. There's some of this that I'm a little bit confused about. Last week, we talked about 2.8% increase. And then we said, if we want to do the hospital, I believe was 380,000 over 4 year, which was 95,000 a year. And I agree with Mr. Cosby. I was thinking of doing it with the 5 year. So 5 into 380,000 is 76,000, which is just a shade over 1%. If you use 75,300, which was supposed to be the mark for a 1% increase. Through the mayor to Ms. DeFilippis, I thought when you mentioned last week, it was 75,300 equates to a 1% increase. Is that not correct?
Through you, Mayor Bylsma, to Councilor Rayner, that's the increase to the local levy, the West Lincoln portion of the levy. However, when you look at the total tax bill it's not as large of an impact.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because we mentioned it was 76,000 if you go over 5 years, and it's like 1.2 or something, and then 1.3, I believe it was. And we said, well, that was 4.1. We didn't want to go over 4. So I thought, what if we amortize it over 5 year, which would make it 3.8, adding 1% for the hospital onto the 2.8. But somehow when you added the hospital on, which is the same number that equates to a 1% tax increase, you got 3.1. Where did we save the 0.7?
Through you, Mayor Bylsma, to Councilor Rayner. So if you look at chart 2 in your report, you'll notice there's an increase on the township levy, and then there's an increase on the total bill. So chart 2, which does not include the hospital levy, the overall township levy increase is 5.3%. If you look at chart 4, the overall township levy increase is 6.24%. So there is your 1% increase. It's on the township levy portion of the bill. However, because the township portion of the bill is only about 1/3 of the total bill, the increase is only 3.1% compared to the 2.8%. So you are correct. A 1% increase equates to 75,300, but that is only for the township levy. And that is what council actually approves, the township levy.
Clear as mud.
Okay, now
Go ahead.
clear as mud, eh? I'm almost thinking the same thing right now because I'm a little bit confused. Was that number not last week, the hospital fund, was that number not 380,000?
Through you, Mayor Bylsma, to Councilor Rayner. Yes, it is. So chart number 3 of the report, it indicates the total amount of the levy requirement for the hospital. So over 5 years, we need to collect or raise taxes that will total 381,000. I provided a chart to council where I'm proposing what the increases would look like over the years 2021 to 2025. You can see it averages to about an increase of 76,000 a year. Those are increases each year, so it will accumulate to 381,000. So we will have enough money in the levy to pay off the future debenture.
Okay, so you said, through you, Mr. Mayor, you said 76,000, which was a number I had, 380 divided by 5, as compared to 380 divided by 4, which was 95. So we lowered it to make it less painful over the 5-year period. But then if you take the 75,300, which was the number used to equate to 1%, that is just a shade over the 1%. So I thought it was the 2.8 that you originally had, plus if you wanted to add the hospital, it was the 1, which made it 3.8. And it's hard, I can't fathom how 3.8 became 3.1. I'm happy it's there, but, and in fact, I was shocked, but somehow there's a difference here that was clear last week. It was one or the other. Like either you take the 1.27 or whatever, add it to the 3.8 if you want to go 4-year, and we're like 4.1% or something, or you spread it over 5 years and we're below 4%, but you're almost at 3%.
So Councillor,
The mayor would say it's clear as mud. I'm still not quite sure where that 0.7 came from.
it's a little bit of apples and oranges and oranges. 75,000, what, the director, if I could put a few words and she can correct me, but a $75,000 increase on our municipal levy has a smaller effect than the $75,000 on the hospital levy. And so I think that's where the different, the hospital portion is right up on top. And I think that's maybe where you're getting a little bit of confusion there. $75,000 on a municipal portion versus a hospital portion, which is basically a separate levy again. And so you're in different categories. I know it does sound a little bit confusing, but you have to recognize you're in 2 different categories. So think about it. And I'm gonna let the treasurer correct me. Go ahead.
For you, Mayor Bilsma, I am not correcting you.
Okay.
Perhaps if I state it this way to Councillor Rayner, the West Lincoln portion, the West Lincoln levy, without the hospital levy included, is $8,054,840. We add 75,300. That's your approximate 1% increase.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you look at the total tax bill, it does not equate to a 1% increase because, as the mayor mentioned, the West Lincoln portion of the total tax bill is only about 1/3.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Okay, but it's just that it wasn't brought up last week to explain it that way. So that's why I was surprised. Now I seen if that would have been explained last week, I would have said, oh, it's going to be under 3.8. This could be even better.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden I'm looking at this saying, oh, I wonder how that happened.
Yeah.
So I have a few questions for the mayor, if I may, at this time, because it relates to the hospital.
Sure.
There's a couple things that really bother me. 25 years ago, this township put a considerable sum of money down towards the new hospital. The new hospital, that did not come, but a substantial amount of money that would have been at that time a heck of a lot of money for a project that would have been a heck of a lot less money to build. Now, 25 years later, we get stuck with paying this extra due to 25 years of inflation. Is there anything that we could do to say, we stepped up to the table 25 years ago and we put our share in because you sat on it? It now costs 300% more than it did if you built it 20 years ago. This township should not be responsible for picking up the tab because you took forever to finally get your act together. We were proactive. We put our money in. We've committed ourselves. We're done on this. If you want to sit and let it blow up and end up being 3 times as much to build, that's your fault. We went and gave you the money you needed at that time to do the job. Is there any way that we have anything to say on this? Because it seems unjust. Had we done nothing, Mr. Mayor, 25 years ago, I would have said, hey, I agree. You know, everybody did. But this township and the aldermen back then were very responsive to doing this and showing how much the West Lincoln wanted to get this hospital built. And for that now, we're paying a massive penalty 25 years later because so many regimes of the Liberal and Conservative and NDP governments have gone through this province and nothing's happened. Isn't there anything we can do to try to mellow that number because of the honesty and integrity and the responsibility that this township has shown towards this project?
And so the quick answer is yes, and we did some of that. So let me explain. So first of all, apples to apples, oranges to oranges. In 2000, of course, everything was cheaper. So the 1.25 sounds cheaper today than it did back then. It was quite a commitment back then, and very grateful to the people who did it back then. It was quite a commitment. A couple things have changed. Obviously, the percentages that the province has determined need to be raised locally has increased. It's just a reality of 20 years of politics at the provincial level. So that is a challenge. However, that money, so first and foremost, that money was raised at that time till it was a certain point, and then it was held in trust. However, as a trust fund, the township did reap a benefit. And as a counselor now for many, many years, I can attest that our director has told us about our investments that have generated revenues for the township. And so you can do two things with a fund. You can keep growing it basically forever. And had we done that, we might be very, very close to the 6 million some odd that we need today. However, that was not how that policy was stated back then. So it grew to the 1.25 million. And then we reaped benefits, monetary benefits, revenues from that, investment revenues from that the town has benefited. So when this gets paid, we will no longer have those revenues. So that's just something to note. The second thing that I wanted to say is back then with the funding formula that we shared with the other two municipalities, we looked at that being with Grimsby and Lincoln, a three-way partnership. However, 20 years later, we were able to, because of other forces, we were able to bring in a fourth partner. That fourth partner was the region. And so that was a mitigating negotiation that greatly helped the three municipalities here in the east. And that was, there was some precedents set when St. Catharines build went through approximately 2000, let me see, 2014, I believe, more or less. I mean, it was a long process as well, but 2014, give or take, St. Catharines received monies from the region, and we basically negotiated with the region at that precedent. So those are some mitigating things. It's probably not an exhaustive answer, but those kind of deal with some of the high level things. But I did see that Councillor Ganan did have her hand up. Maybe she wanted to add something.
I think you explained it very well. I just wanted to point out that the 1.25 million that we had was what a couple of years ago, and a couple of different times Councillor Rayner has asked about how did we end up with so much money coming back through investments. I think at one point it was over $200,000 or whatever, and he was questioning our director about that. And so that is the amount of money that we've had put aside that added to those investments. And so I was just going to speak to that further. The other thing I was going to point out is that the province is putting 140 million towards this project, and the local share is 27,400, but that's fixtures and furniture and all of that. The province, the philosophy and the not even philosophy, the legislation now states that they will provide the hospital, but that is just the building without anything inside. And so the local share and the regional share in particular, and as well as what's earned and raised by the foundation, that's what's going to put the beds and the machinery and the equipment and stuff inside. And so the rules have changed. The rules have changed. And for certain, we're lucky that we put away the money that we did years ago. Lincoln did the same and Grimsby did not. So Grimsby actually started putting their hospital share aside last year in readiness for the payment out in about 2024. So
Thank you. One further question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
St. Catherine's, because of that new hospital built in 2014 or whatever, are they still paying their share, all the taxpayers in St. Catherine's, like we will have to do for
Yes.
ours? Is
And
it
so-
consistent?
Yes, that's very consistent. And I will say this, that was also a three-way partnership. They also included Thorold and Niagara on the Lake in that build. And so there is a bit of a pairing up or a trisecting of partners for the various hospitals. Niagara South Hospital, predominantly on the south end of Niagara Falls, will be a partnership also at that end with at least Fort Erie, Niagara Falls, and perhaps another partner, maybe, and I don't know, but just as a little bit of an aside, that whole our ability to negotiate at the region was probably the biggest win that we accomplished in this term, because it's establishing the region's, how would you say, as a shareholder in public health and the healthcare system of our region. So St. Catherine's did, kind of the first foray, but I think now that we've gone through the system, we've established what will be an ongoing precedent that I think is really good, that the Niagara region should be a partner in the healthcare system. So anyways, hopefully that answers your questions. And helps you apples to apple or per capita, we're almost in the same numbers. Our residents are paying just a little bit more per capita, but we're a smaller hospital and for a smaller contribution of people. St. Catherine's, of course, was a bigger hospital, but there were more people, and so when you boil it down to per capita, it almost comes out to a very similar amount.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other counselors wishing to speak on any items in the budget that were presented? Councillor Jonker.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I'm glad that the Director of Finance did it over the 5 years. The math makes sense to me. You look at the charts, the increases are 1%, and then when you divide it by the third, it is the 2.8 to the 3.10. So the numbers make sense, and it does make sense to do this over 5 years. I think that's a wise decision for us to do. At the end of the day, we have to pay it. Might be a little painful this year, but it's going to help over the next 4 years after that, right? So I just like to thank Donna for doing that and putting it in here as an option for us to support or not to support. But I really need to keep that levy in here. And as Mr. Crosby had noted, he agrees with that too. And it does make sense. So I just want to put that out there. And other than that, I think nothing else has changed from the other night, and there was not that many comments. So I think I'm happy with it. And I would really like to see that we keep that 5 years levy for the hospital as she's proposing. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, I guess I want to start with just thanking staff for putting this all together. I realize this is the point where now we get to, pick and choose what actually happens, but in no way does that indicate, approval or disapproval of the effort that staff has put forward. So thank you for Donna and everyone else for, having to sit there and figure out what was going to be potentially included in this year's budget and what you've been able to shelve for future year budgets. I think talking about the hospital levy, I know last week, one of the things we were looking at trying to help everybody else, given the current circumstance, was what the possibility would look like deferring it. But seeing the 75.3 and how that goes up to, a little bit more next year, because we have to do this until we can get to that 381 mark. I definitely think this is probably a little bit easier on people than throwing the whole 95.5 at them. And so I definitely am more in support of that idea now than I was last week. It was last week or the week before that. I guess it would have been the week before that. So that I'm fine with. I do want to point out a couple other things. we're talking about, based on even what's being proposed here at the 5.62% local levy. Everyone loves throwing around the blended rate because it makes it sound better. But the reality is, through the municipal side of things, we're talking about 5.62% increase. And that was based on what was it, about $122 per household at around the 382 mark. And I know there's suggestions that it was cheaper than it was last year, but when I went and confirmed that, even with the township website, indicated last year was actually $76 per household, and it was actually around 604. So we're actually paying about 65% more that would be coming out of the taxpayer's pocket, whether that's a resident or a business, than would have been in previous year. So I don't want there to be any confusion that we're trying to indicate that this is a cheaper levy than last year. This is actually substantially more. And part of that reason comes with some of the special projects. And I support a fair bit of the ideas that are in the budget. But one of the things I think we need to be mindful as representatives in our communities, recognizing the realities that, that plague the members of our community, whether it's in business or whether it's those residents who are on fixed incomes or just returning to work. As we know commercially, they pay twice the amount of tax. There was it 2% or 2.25% more than a residential. So all these impacts, and I hear from businesses through the community who one's dealing with an issue with their landlord because the landlord's putting the rent up again and again, and now this is actually going to just put them almost out of business. It might not sound like much, but every little bit keeps adding up. And when you have people not working, or struggling to work to fit within the guidelines, and who knows, maybe we go back in another lockdown and it just tilts the scale entirely. So I would like to see this council try to figure out if there's some way we can trim this down. I just, again, like, I understand everybody wants to focus on the blended rate because the blended rate looks better than it did last year because the region took a lot last year. And I realize in this time of the term is probably the best time for us to ask for a little bit more if the region's going to ask for a little bit less. But I want the reality to be recognized that we're asking for substantially more money for projects that even our own staff had mentioned could wait with maybe a small incurring costs, when I think 1% or 2% was thrown around for one of the debentures. And to be clear, as Councillor Rayner was, and I think all of us could understand the confusion of understanding why that 1% difference from the hospital levy would not translate the same way as maybe one would think about it. When we look at how the debenture is, when the 1% or 2% was thrown around, we're talking about $6,000 because it's not 1% of the tax levy. That 1 or 2% would be relative to the debenture itself. And so when we look at how we can help people in our community, I think we should be looking at, this is not the time for special projects. This is a time for ensuring that, we have the stability we need to keep the community going, keep the community growing. And so at the same time, we need to be mindful of the impact that's having on many residents and not just ourselves. I think it's easy for us to, get caught up that it's only $11 a month or it's only $10 a month. But, if you're on fixed income or you're not at work, that's $11, $12 more money than you just don't have. And that's at least, if not, if your property's worth more, you're paying more. You know what I mean? I guess if your property's worth less, you're paying a little bit less, never mind all the other taxation that goes on. So again, I would like to see a little bit more taken off this. Personally, I would love to see if we can get that 3.1 overall blended rate down to 2 by some magical way. I realize that's probably a big ask, but regardless, I wanted to put that out there. Again, I just wanted to, and if anything, to make it very clear too, I'm not opposed to things like upgrading the rural roads or anything like that. I realize that's one of our biggest debentures coming, $660,000 for an upgrade, not necessarily rebuilding or repairing, but an actual upgrade. If that could wait a year, I don't think that's asking too much, and I certainly would support it next year. It's just, I think this is the time where we got to be a little bit more stricter with what we're approving, just to to help those who need the help the most. And honestly, it might not seem much to you or I or anybody else, but we have to be mindful of the true impact that it's going to have on everybody. So I thought I would just make those notes now, wait and see what everybody else says, and then maybe we can kind of work through this a little bit more and see if we can give the taxpayer a better result.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor Bradrick, Trombetta? Haven't heard from you yet. Good.
Do you like to hear from me tonight, Mr. Mayor?
Well, it is the most significant document, and I'm sure, at the very least, I expect you to thank staff.
Well, I did that last week, and I did that even during my as chair as administration. But I'll take the floor from here, Mr. Mayor. That's fine. the budget, there was a lot of hard work put into the budget. There are some things in the budget that you know, are really representative to our Ward 1. Yeah, you know, sure, there's going to be a time where, you know, the municipality is kind of torn. There's, you know, obviously we are dealing with a pandemic, you know, but as for the projects that are being done in the ward, it's going to be pretty hard for me not to accept, you know, the budget that's in front of us, you know, due to, you know, again, there's a road that's being transformed that hasn't been done in approximately, I don't know, probably 20 years. You know, a lot of the rural residents have been waiting for infrastructure improvements. We've been, especially where I live on Ward 1, not a lot has been done out here. And I think that this budget signifies a lot that's being done, and especially in Ward 1. You know, the fire hall, you know, if I got some history on the fire hall was just an old building that a couple councilors back in the day said, hey, maybe we should put another fire station out in that area. And, you know, it was sold on by a couple councilors, and the council of the day, probably back about, if I can help me out, maybe someone can help me with the history. I'm a little younger here, but, you know, the mayor and the council of the day decided to, you know, use the abandoned or the old public works building and turn it into a fire hall, which actually expanded our area, which was our essential needs. And, you know, finally to see that getting done, it's I'm glad I'm seeing it in my tenure as a councillor. It's really exciting. I was always a big supporter of the fire department, you know, in both Station 1 and Station 2. You know, I know a lot of the guys out in Station 2. Great guys, and you know, this is something that I'm glad that they are getting, and you know, it's well deserved. You know, I remember going to the building and I know we had the first time coming in council, realizing the guys didn't even have a functioning shower, and after they do a call in a late barn fire, and you know, these guys would have to come there and you know get back in their trucks and go home, and you know, I think it's just well deserved. So I'm pleased with the stuff that's happening out in the rural community, and it's a long time waiting, and I'd like to thank staff for the budget that they put together. And if this does get passed this evening, I'd like to thank the council that's in front of me this evening. You guys also did a lot of work reading your stuff and good dialogue. So there's, you know, not just staff, but the council that's in front of me if it does get passed this evening, Mr. Mayor. Those are my comments. But thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Councilor Bradrick.
Thank you, Mayor Bice. I do want to thank staff for all their hard work. I can't imagine putting this together. It's a job that must take many months of great consideration. I also wanted to thank Mr. Cosby for his very sound comments, and I was quite intrigued by his comments around the gravel road percentage in the budget. And I just wanted to see if Ms. DeFlippis can comment a little bit about that, or if there was some further thoughts after he did send that letter. Was it forwarded on to Public Works for their consideration to see if that was noteworthy at all according to our roads assessment?
Through you, Mayor Billsma, to Councilor Bradrick. Just for clarification, Mr. Cosby made two comments about the gravel road budget. Are you speaking about the 3% increase that he has been informed will take place for the price of gravel, or are you speaking about the decrease in the budget from 2018? If you can just clarify which item.
I believe his notes had said about the current budget having a 2% increase towards the repairs to the gravel roads. And that I guess he was perhaps challenging if that was enough or not. And perhaps maybe I misunderstood, but that's how I had taken it.
No, through you, Mayor Billsma, to Councilor Bradrick, you did not misunderstand. Just I wanted to clarify because there were two things that he spoke of. So I can confirm that that budget was increased by 2%. In terms of that actual budget, it is done by Public Works, so I can't really comment on the basis that was done. The Director of Public Works is here, Director of Public Works and Rec is here, Mike DePaula. I don't know if he has any further comments to that.
There he goes. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Bradrick. Yeah, we're comfortable with increasing it by 2%. You know, we do buy our stone in bulk and stuff and whatnot, and we do acquire a lot throughout the year. You know, there's price increases on all materials, and who knows where it'll end up over the next year or so. But we're comfortable with the 2% from what we've been spending in previous years. And Mr. Crosby's noted some points about, you know, maintaining the roads with, you know, getting rid of that secondary shoulder to make sure the roads drain properly, and the loss of the aggregates. You know, we continuously add stones to gravel road to kind of rebuild the structure and to take care of any deficiency, wear and tear as the weather and the traffic beats them up. So I think it's just a timing issue. We need to, you know, just get on top of our gravel roads quicker. But we're comfortable with the 2% increase, and you know, we'll obviously reassess as this year goes and see if we need to increase it more in 2021. Hope that answers your question.
Great, that's perfect. I'm very thankful for your answer. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gannon, did you? Yeah. Okay. Yes, I thought I saw your finger there.
I did, thank you. While we have Director DePaula, although he just left again, so that we can't see him. I was just wondering, I did bring the issue of South Grimsby Road 3 up because that's the one that I hear from most people about. And in fact, I think I spoke with you after I received a compliment about the job that was done on South Grimsby Road 3. And then that huge rain came, and within days after complimenting the good job that our staff had done on that road, it was back worse than ever. And I think that's what Mr. Cosby was alluding to. He had gone down at that point after that rain. So my question, I guess, is just whether I was surprised, I guess, when the roads need study came out that it wasn't included in the top 10 roads that needed to be done in the next little while. And so I just wonder if staff could, or someone could sort of reevaluate that road in the spring after we've had a meltdown and or after a heavy rain or whatever, because if somebody happened to go down it on a good day after it was graded, it might have looked like it was in good shape, but it certainly is not in good shape most of the time. So I guess it's just an opportunity for me to keep it sort of top of your mind, Director, so that it doesn't get missed out. It certainly is a road that's being traveled by a great many people. Now they're sort of going down Industrial and then cutting, if you're heading Lincoln Way or St. Catherine's Way, many people are opting to go on South Grimsby Road 3 to sort of get out of town and head towards the Queenie or even Highway 8. So I guess I just don't want us to forget about that road, because it still is a rural road, even though it's in Ward 3. And it certainly is the one that I hear about from most constituents. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to weigh in just with a couple of comments, and then we'll go kind of a second time through give people a second opportunity. And just so our budgets are a balancing act, and I think we found a very good balance between what happened in 2020 to our residents in terms of COVID, our response to that. I think that there's a large segment of the population that would be very impressed that we were able to meet our service obligations, advance on our strategic plan, and to do so with what I feel to be a very responsible budget increase of and I like to use the blended 3.1 because that's the one that they see on their bill. Because I maybe in a small way I can claim that because we did some heavy lifting at the region in order to get their budget to 2%. So that was a vigorous discussion because last year we had to kind of dig deep and go more, and that was to address policing was the biggest increase last year, and again this year, but more significant last year. So we weigh things all the time, and maybe just a little bit of a response to what Councillor Riley had said. We have on the one side a concern that, say, Councillor Ganan had raised, and Councillor Trumbetta, I think, talked about it as well. Councillor Bradrick talked about just, we have that the concerns raised about our roads. And then we have the concerns raised by Councillor Riley and in terms of trying to find the best savings. And we walk a tight line, and those councillors who have been on here for a number of terms know that tight line. We can fall off the road in ditches on both sides. We can try to be the taxpayer hero, the ratepayer hero, but the roads start to deteriorate. And we've seen what happens in our municipality, maybe at different times when that happened, and we get bridges that start to close. And then on the other side, we have councils that don't know how to say no to any projects, and they run up double-digit increases. And so we found that balance. I'm very pleased with this budget. I feel that it is struck a balance between the two, and I think that I really respect the input by a resident such as Mr. Cosby, who also recognizes, that balance. But I was also paying attention, and there was a bit of a thread that was happening in the public forum on Facebook. Councillor Riley, Councillor Ganan were kind of engaging a little bit in the public and just kind of reading between the lines and looking at the dialogue. And I found that dialogue too was quite balanced. And so that's what our jobs are as councillors, to listen to the public and to find that middle ground. And I believe that this budget has found that. So that's my statement on the budget. Thank you to the staff for hearing us as we heard our residents. You heard us, and I think that this budget reflects that. So I'm going to go at this time to Councillor Rayner for a second time, and then Councillor Riley. And he's talking again without taking the mute off.
Oh, I do it all the time. You're an old guy. You can't figure the damn things out.
You're okay.
Anyways, okay. Roads. As we know, since I've been a councillor in 2003, roads have always been the #1 priority. It's been rough the last little while with 11-year drought, and there's so many roads need to be done. And we got a call on the weekend from somebody, and the roads concession 2 is starting to fall apart again because we received rain on the weekend, and it's caused a lot of holes and a lot of mess and a lot of frustration. So it's nice to see that's being done, and I'm pleased that we're finally starting in the right direction to go that way. With regards to the fire hall, again, it's been my passion since 2003. I was part of the new fire hall in the town. There were 3 drawings of the fire hall, and I pushed very strongly for the largest one. I always said you will often regret building it too small, but you will never regret building it too large. I hope Chief Fisher is happy with the size, and he's probably complaining now that it's probably too small. But it was the biggest of the 3, and I'm proud to be able to push it. I'm looking forward to the fire hall in Station 2. That's been a long, long wait for me. And I'm hoping the drawings will be available, and council will be able to also participate in that to the benefit of all the hardworking guys that look after us out there in Station 2. And obviously I think we've done a beautiful hall for those in Station 1. Councillor Riley mentioned about trying to find some money. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, we have the MERS that's locked in at 15.2% compounded every year, which brought it up to 16.2. And when you add the 3.1, if we approve that tonight, it's 19.3. However, this building is not used right now. And even when it is used, the Pfizer and Moderna are only 95% effective, which means they still could be a source of disease transmission. But right now, that building isn't used, and we received $329,000 to offset the cost of COVID. Well, to me, offsetting the cost of COVID is also to offset the cost of a building that we paid $31 million for and can't use. So I'm wondering if we take like 2 months of that we really haven't used this building to what the hoopla was when we were building it a few years ago, because it kind of fell flat in its face and closed down in less than a couple of years. That works out to about 2.7%. So if you take the 2.7%, equate that to a dollar value and take it off the tax and use the COVID money we received from the government towards things that were caused by COVID, I think it would be legitimate to use some of the balance that we have left over, because we didn't apply for phase 2 of it because we had reserves left over from the 329. Why don't we take some of that and use it to pay for the building that nobody's utilizing, nobody's enjoying, and even when we can, it's going to be risky, and use that to knock the 3.1 down a little bit. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Donna DePolitvis, Director of Finance, is there a possibility we could look at that? Because that certainly was impacted by COVID. Why can't we use some COVID money to offset the taxpayers for something they cannot utilize?
Director?
Through you, Mayor Billsma, to Councillor Rayner, I apologize. So just to clarify, the levy of the, 8,554,840, there is 888,500 included in that amount that has been raised for the rec center. That amount doesn't change every year. Like once we've raised the 880,500, it stays. We're not increasing that each year. So I just want to clarify that. That payment is needed in the base to pay off the debt. So regardless of COVID or the facility being used, the payment of the debt must go on. Now, in terms of COVID and the funding we received from the province, all throughout 2020, council received monthly reports as to what COVID, how it was impacting the municipality. And you'll note that there were months with lost revenue from the rec center.
Right.
And that lost revenue is continuing into 2021, as we know that the rec center is opening this week now that we're in red. However, we've already accounted for that with COVID funds. So there's a schedule in the report. It's Schedule E, where you'll see that we've estimated the impacts of COVID to the budget, and then we've outlined to council how we're funding it. So we're using the full amount of any funding from the province. So we are covering some of the lost revenue from the rec center.
So there's nothing else we can do. We're offsetting whatever the number is. We're making up the difference with the COVID money that was received.
Yes, we've ensured that COVID is not impacting this budget.
Yeah, I thought maybe there was an opportunity there, if we didn't, that we could utilize the COVID money and therefore offset the taxpayers, which would help Councilor Riley find some money somewhere without affecting everything else that everybody seems to be pretty happy with. The only other thing I have, Mr. Mayor, is I know Councilor Ganan, Grimsby Road 3. I used to own a farm on Grimsby Road 3, so I'm quite familiar with that road. But I think we've got a lot of councillors that sleep in the weekends, because I had a call at 10 after 7 in the morning from a very frustrated individual who said he called just about every councillor in the phone book in West Lincoln, and you're the only one that answers the phone at 7 o'clock in the morning. Can you help me? I said, what is it? He said, Grimsby Road 3, it's an ice rink. Can somebody do something with it? And I thought, okay, 10 after 7 in the morning, you call me on a Saturday. I'm going to get the Public Works guys to rush right down there and do that right now.
I thought it was at 7, but I was sleeping and my phone was off.
Yeah, and I'm the only one who heard the phone all the way to the other end of the house, got up, ran to the other end of the house because I don't have the phone near my bed, and to answer a call from a person who lives in Grimsby, who was searching all the phone numbers for West Lincoln to let the councillors know that the roads weren't very good. So anyways, we got to have shift work here on the weekends. We're each councillor takes a turn to answer the early calls. So yes, South Grimsby Road 3 is even highlighted for people who don't live in this township.
Good.
Pretty well. anyways, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate all the time.
Okay, and I'm gonna just go to Madam CAO, who wanted to just weigh in there for a second. Bev, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bilsma. I was going to refer to the fact that the Wesleyan Community Center is opening this week, just to contrast Councillor Rayner's comments about the fact that the building is not in use. So with the conversion to red, it is reopening this week.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that as well. And the library has been functioning the whole time, curbside, of course, but you know, I know my family's been taking it
Correct.
to the library as well. So Councillor Riley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I guess I wanted to mention, I have no missed phone calls, so whoever that individual was, I don't think called every member of council, but needless to say, you know, thankfully they got through to somebody. The question I actually had before, and it kind of slipped my mind, I wanted to ask our Director of Finance, so through you to the Director of Finance. I know last committee I had brought up the urban service area fee. And so for those people who I didn't realize afterwards, not everybody kind of was aware of what that fee was. And it's basically an extra tax that the Ward 3 residents get to pay for the, you know, the street lights and the sidewalks that we have in our community. And then outside of that, you know, our Ward 3 residents get to also share on the taxes to cover, you know, the same kind of luxuries that are in the rural community. So my question to you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Finance, at what point in the future do you think it seems that, I don't know, a staff recommendation would come forward to remove that second tax that the Ward 3 residents have to pay? Because out of the 654, you know, streetlights we have, 214 fall into the rural area that Ward 3 gets to pay for as well as their own, but Ward 1 and 2 are exempt from having to pay for the ones in Ward 3. You know, and I know there's about, you know, 30, just shy of 30 kilometers of sidewalk that we have to share the cost sharing with, yet we have to cover the cost of our own sidewalks, and Ward 1 and 2 are exempt from that as well. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what that looks like. Are we waiting for that number to be closer to, you know, 50-50? Like, at what point do we actually just unite the whole municipality and everyone just share the costs them evenly? Or is Ward 3 always going to be taxed twice?
Through you, Mayor Bilsma, to Councillor Riley, thank you for the question. So just to give further background, the 2021 budget includes the urban service area levy that you referred to. Sidewalks, it's 112,130. Streetlights, it's 80,400 for a total of $192,530. That represents a 2% or a $4,130 increase over 2020. You are correct. That amount is levied over the properties in the urban serviced area, which is mapped. Now, if council were to have a resolution to remove that special area levy, those costs of $192,530 would then be levied on every property in West Lincoln. You would see a shift from the urban taxpayer would be lower. The rural taxpayer would have an increase. It would be a hit that first year. There would be shifts. And then after that, you would not notice because everyone would have the same base the following year. The removal of this levy would be by resolution of council. It would not be something that staff would be recommending.
So Mr. Mayor, if I can keep going. So at no point staff would probably be of the mind to like bring that to resolve it or dissolve it in any capacity. It's always going to have to be, I guess, motivated or initiated through council. Is that what I'm understanding?
Through you, Mayor Bilsma, to Councillor Riley. This levy has been around a long time. I can't even tell you how long this levy's been around. And when it was first introduced, it was introduced by council. It was not a decision of staff. So to remove it would be a decision. You have to remember that the reason this levy is here is because of the services. The sidewalks are cleaned in the rural area, in the urban area, and for the street lights. It would not be staff that would be removing this. In terms of the math, if you had a year with significant assessment growth and no tax increase, then that, if you were to remove this levy, the shift would be minimized. In a year where you have low assessment growth and a higher tax levy increase, the shift will be magnetized.
Okay. And so I got a couple more comments to that. One, I feel, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot here, but do you know what, I know you said it was about 192,000, but in dollar form, is there a number that would actually spell it out? Because I think, we can talk percentages and that's always going to sound scarier, but like, I actually don't recall, I don't have my tax bill on me, but my contribution component, it's obviously not, it's enough, but it's not like it's, adding thousands of dollars to our tax bill, each individual. So is that number, at least for the urban area, what is that per year? Is that the 20? I think I saw in the one form there is like 2055. Is that for the full year that's divided by the quarterly, or is that per installment?
Through you, Mayor Billsma, to Councillor Riley, the urban levy tax cost, I believe it's $88. I had it in last month's report. I believe the average homeowner in the urban area is paying an additional $88 compared to the same assessed property in the rural area.
So obviously I don't have all these numbers, but like that number would obviously decrease probably slightly if we ever get to the point where we can do it as unite as one municipality and share all of the tax responsibilities. But that number is still around, like I was going to say, around $70 range in that ballpark. If we were to have that just as one and all.
Through you, Mayor Billsma, to Councillor Riley, that if you were to make it one and all, you would be removing the levy. So you would just add the 192,000 to the 8 million.
I see. Okay, and then
So
through
what
that,
would happen is when you're comparing it, you would see people in the urban area, their taxes would be lowered, and those in the rural area, their taxes would be increased.
and that's just to kind of get them up to what the urban area is already paying. So it's not that the urban area is actually paying less. We've already been paying that price. It's just bringing them back into that level playing field, right?
Through you, Mayor Billsma, to Councillor Riley, the math doesn't work exactly like that. It's a split. You're taking an amount, 192,000, and you're allocating it to every property in the township.
Yeah, but everybody would be paying.
It's not bringing anybody up to a certain level. It's not going to be comparator. You won't be able to say, oh, here, my house in the urban area went down $50. Yours in the rural went up 50. It won't work out that way exactly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to explain it that way. I meant like everybody would be paying whatever. If my house is worth 400,000, someone else's house is worth 400,000, we'd just be paying one and the same rate for that, but it wouldn't be recognized or identified because it would just be molded into the tax base. So I just want to point something else out that I find also very concerning is that, obviously this was directed by council at the time. And I think it's, a very unfair situation to be in, considering the urban area only has 2 representatives and the rural areas outnumber us. I just don't see a situation where the rural area is going to be in support of this. And I hope I'm wrong, but I just feel like, everyone's obviously is looking out for their ward and their constituents, but, we've been amalgamated now for over 30 years. And so now here we are, and there's still this wedge, this divide that, kind of separate us. At the same time, would it make sense that we create maybe a rural service area fee that covers the cost specifically to the rural area that we're seeing separated from the urban area? And is that the conversation that really needs to take place? Obviously, there's a little bit more lights and significantly more sidewalks in the urban area, but maybe to keep things fair so people don't feel that, they're being, having to pay 2 taxes versus 1. Maybe the discussion around an urban area service tax needs to be in consideration. And so if those through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Finance, if that were to happen, again, I might understand that would have to come from council. And 2, I also find that troubling, and I'm not, obviously that's how it has to be, but I mean, I find it troubling that how is this not just holding Ward 3 over? Like Ward 3 is very unlikely we're going to get the support. So I feel like, Ward 3 really gets penalized twice here because, again, if we manage to have in the future a Ward 3 mayor, they're still going to be outnumbered 3 to 4. And so I just don't really like this whole process. I think it's messy. I think the council at the time, I don't know what their thought process was around implementing this, but I certainly wish they, were more focused on just keeping the municipality one municipality instead of worrying about putting a wedge between the urban and rural residents. So I guess, you know, I
Well,
won't.
Councillor Riley, thank you for your thoughts. Just want to bring this just into clarity in terms of this particular meeting. It is something that you can bring up next year. This was discussed last week. It was voted on. It was defeated. And so we can't really, we can't go any further on that in this meeting. The clerk has informed me that it would be a reconsideration.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I could ask then, last week, all that was voted on, it wasn't about whether or not this should be removed. Last week, we voted on whether or not we could have staff present what that would look like removing it, not necessarily whether or not it would be upheld. So that information would be incorrect by my understanding of last week's meeting. So I just wanted to point that out. We did not vote on removing it last week.
I just want to make sure.
Information forward. Sorry, I'd like to finish talking here, Mr. Mayor. We voted on specifically staff possibly bringing back what that would look like to remove it. So I'll leave it there, but I want to make that very clear that there's no confusion.
And you're absolutely right. You have that opportunity at any time to bring that forward. And I think so. At this point, are you complete with your thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And sorry for interrupting there. I just wanted to kind of provide some guidance. So, Councillor, I think I have Councillor Jonker next. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to respond a little bit to what he was also saying, and that's what the director of finance pointed out too. And it was mentioned the other week, the other meeting as well. Sidewalks are maintained in Smithville. The sidewalks in the little village of St. Anne's are not maintained. There's differences, right? And that's why I think council way back when they made that decision realized there's some differences in services. And probably at that time, the people out in the country were pointing out the fact that we don't have street lights. We walk along our road. The only time we have a light is way down the road at an intersection. So I can appreciate what you're trying to bring forward, Councillor Riley, but at the same time, there's differences. And I think council noted that way back and made the adjustment. And I think it's good, but
there's 214 lights now, just so you know, times have changed.
Councillor Riley, Councillor Jonker has the floor. Okay, he's done. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're just doing this in an orderly fashion. Budget's always passionate, and I appreciate that. Okay, any others? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Gannan, go ahead.
Seeing none was a little bit too quick.
It was, but I did.
Nice try.
Got it under there. Yeah, go ahead.
Very good try, but you didn't succeed. Anyway, bottom line is, obviously where Councillor Riley is coming from, and I did speak to it a little bit at the last budget meeting as well, and that is when we're looking at major projects being done in the rural area, the bridges that have been done, the roads that have been worked upon, the various other things in terms of that, whether we decide to pave roads or just fix the roads that are gravel roads and make them better gravel roads. It takes a good portion of our budget, probably half of our budget at least. A couple of years ago, it was explained to me that about half of the capital budget went on roads and about 85% of that was spent in the rural area. And so we do hear from residents, why are we paying extra? And so, yes, there was a reason a long time ago when it was probably the only urban area. Sidewalks were not all done then. There weren't that many sidewalks, but yes, there were streetlights and yes, there are sidewalks. Many people come from rural area, West Lincoln, and come in and walk on those sidewalks, especially now the walking track has not been open through our shutdown. So you have that whole thing going on. I think ultimately we need to look down the road, however it has to happen, at just assessing everybody in West Lincoln the same way so that it doesn't matter where you live, you benefit from the part of the area you live in. Whether you walk on a sidewalk or you suddenly have your road looked after, it shouldn't matter. We're all West Lincoln residents. Having said that, the one thing I also wanted to talk about is the fact that I'm not a fan of percentages. We toss around percentages a lot, but you know, a percentage of a lot is a lot of money that you get. A percentage of not such a lot is a smaller amount of money. And so, Mr. Mayor, when you referred to talking about comparing apples and apples and not apples to oranges, we have to look at that. So our surrounding municipalities have put out, whether they were 1.7 in Lincoln or I think they're looking at 1.8 or something as a proposed Grimsby. It still works out to about the same number of dollars per household as what our higher percentage. People have trouble understanding percentages. I wish we didn't have to deal with them. I know mathematically and from the treasurer's point of view, it needs to be done that way. But percentages aren't really fair when we're looking at what other people around us are paying. In actual fact, you know, a 2% increase in ours or a 3% increase, whatever it turned out to be, probably compares to about that 1.7 in Lincoln if you're looking at what households actually have to pay in their taxes. So if there's another way to explain it rather than percentage based, I think our treasurer has tried to do that. Unfortunately, by the time this gets out to the public, you know, it still becomes this whole percentage thing, and that always isn't it isn't a fair reflection of what we've tried to do with West Lincoln Town.
And you're absolutely right. And I think the director does give us the values in dollar terms, kind of break it down by month, by year, per assessment value. At the end of the day, I think it's fair to say that the director is trying to create a picture and say it multiple different ways for a very diverse municipality, and it's difficult to be sure. It would be probably a whole lot simpler if we were a homogeneous type municipality. I can't imagine that one exists, but at the end of the day, there's I think that there's several ways of saying it, and but I appreciate what you're saying, and I guess maybe we're drawn into the way that it's often reported in the paper, because I know that we're going to be sending out just so everyone knows, we're going to be sending out a media release tomorrow with respect to this budget, and it has multiple lines on there, pretty much the same ones that are in front of us in this recommendation, and the media usually picks up the percentage. So you know, at the end of the day, we're kind of stuck.
That's an easier thing for them to deal with, but it has always been a difficult thing. It's no different than a raise situation. You know, a percentage raise is always more for the people at the higher level than the people at the lower level. And so with our tax situation, I feel like, you know, it's kind of reversed, but it's the same problem. People just don't really understand that in dollars and cents, it isn't as dreadful as it can sound. Percentage.
And there's other factors. Our assessment value is our assessment value of West Lincoln, and it's different in Grimsby, Lincoln, and all the other municipalities. That's the first thing. And the second thing is our taxes are already at different levels. So a 2% increase in one municipality might be equal to a 2.3% increase in other ones, because they're already taxed at different rates. And so you're right. And that's why I think that the director and the CAO try to give us this package in multiple different talking points and break it down in multiple different ways, so that we get a clear picture. And we're certainly very transparent. I've always enjoyed that about the West Lincoln budget process. Very transparent. Had lots of portals for entrance from residents and for ourselves, and so and we're getting feedback, so we know that this is working, and even during COVID. So Councillor Ganan, you still have the floor.
No, I just want to thank the director for putting it out in so many different fashions, and please plug away and see if we can somehow get away from percentages when this is presented to the public. I know we'll get even more phone calls after this. Just one more quick note. The phone calls that I have had have all been in support of starting the hospital this year and getting that funding going. So I've heard from quite a few residents and have asked a few that I've just met incidentally, and that seems to be, we're committed, let's get going. So
yeah. Okay, before I go to Councillor Jonker for a third time, I'm going to see if there's any other councillors that would like to speak first. Go ahead, Councillor Bradrick.
Thank you very much. I apologize in advance if I should have perhaps asked this question last week. But over the week, I was thinking about the effects of COVID on the operations of the town hall, and looking through the budget lines and and wondering if there was any way that some of those lines could have perhaps been decreased, knowing that 2021 is still going to be a year where COVID is, very present in our day-to-day lives. So for example, and through you, Mayor Bilsma, to Director DeFilippis, if you could comment on that line around town, for example, town hall furniture, since the town hall is probably not used to the capacity as it was in the past, and perhaps won't be for this a majority of this budget year. Is that something that could be contemplated to be decreased, and perhaps maybe even some other lines in, for example, recreation, since a lot of programs may or may not and have not operated? Is there some chance for some slight cost savings due to COVID restricting our operations?
Through you, Mayor Bilsma, to Councillor Braderick. So if I reflect back on to 2020, when COVID came and shocked us all, what you're referring to, we described as mitigating measures. So it's hard to budget for because we can't predict, but if during the year we see that, I'm going to give an example, Canada Day, we're not able to do a Canada Day. So we don't spend as much money, it would be a mitigating cost. So that would mean we would not perhaps need to transfer the 100,000 or as much from the contingency reserve. So it's not budgeted in such a way. If we do have savings from COVID, it would lower the amount we need to draw from the reserve. And we do track it.
Okay, I appreciate that for that type of example, but I'm just kind of thinking about things that we know for sure that will not be the same kinds of operations. Was there an opportunity for you and your staff to go through the budget and kind of, take out some items, or you just added them in as if we were normal operations?
Through you, Mayor Bilsma, to Councillor Braderick. What we did is we budgeted as a normal year. The reason being, if we were to reduce a line item such as, I will take Canada Day because I was saying that, or training. If I were to reduce it, $10,000, next year you're going to see an increase of 10,000. So it's just going to hit the levy again. So it's best practices to budget steady levels with inflation if needed. A lot of these items we did not apply inflation to. The only time I'm a fan of cutting is if it's a permanent cut in operating. In terms of capital and special projects, they're different because they're one-shot items. In 2020, for example, we deferred some of our capital items because of COVID. We didn't go ahead with a band shell and a pavilion at Leisureplex in order to save money. So in times like that, those are some examples of how we dealt with COVID.
Okay, well, what about the town hall furniture, for example? That's an $80,000 expense. Is that a capital expense?
Through you, Mayor Bilsma, to Councillor Braderick, yes, it is a capital expense. That one is being funded from a reserve. So it's funded from the building department reserve. So if it were deferred or eliminated, it wouldn't impact the tax levy as such. That equipment, that furniture is related to the renovations that are going on in the old library. It's to furnish that area of the town hall. So if it were to be deferred, we would not be able to move staff into that new area. And that would be the consequence of that. But as I said, it would not actually change the levy.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you, Councillor Braderick. And just a kind of a footnote, it is quite timely that we have that extra space because we have this desire due to COVID to space people out. So we have, if you're familiar with the back here, we have 3 people sometimes in kind of an alcove, and we're trying to thin that out a little bit. So there's a real benefit to having this renovation take place at this time. As the Director of Finance stated, it is being funded through the building department reserve. So, okay.
My only thought was, you know, with so many people and so many industries working from home that, you know, that the people on site may not be that way for, you know, however many months to go or ever again. So just thought I would bring that forward to see if there was an option there.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to go back through to other councilors. So Councilor Jonker, then Councilor Riley again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wanting to note the numbers there, that there are the two charts that we can compare to, and just thanks to Donna for making this charts. The numbers are there, the differences, and yeah, it's interesting how some people like working with percentage, some people like working with a solid number, and those two charts are there to compare, right? So as you can see, if you want to look at it, the increase options are 120 per month versus 135 increase per month or whatever, right? So our Director of Finance does give us those two different things to work with, and I just thought I'd point that out, and it's there for the public to see as well. And like you noted, the media always seems to take the increase in just the percentage, and that's just a weird thing, but that's what they do. So but yeah, the numbers are there for everybody to see, right? So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Riley, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think, well, from how it's been explained to me, I believe through our even director, when I think the first term of council, when it's trying to understand, the percentages and everything, is that, we focus on what the actual municipality percentage is, and, and then trying to understand, the overall picture of, the blended, so people understand the difference between the two. But the only reason I wanted to come back on is I wanted to call for a recorded vote when the time was to vote on the whole budget there. So I want that noted for the record.
Sure. Okay. Now I'm going to ask again, are there any others? This time, Councilor Ganan, I see none. So we're going to go to the vote. We're going to proceed to the vote. And with that, I'm going to go to the clerk because Councilor Riley has asked for a recorded vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Balsma. Okay, sorry, just flipping between screens here. Councilor Riley,
Oppose.
Councilor Broderick,
Support.
Councilor Ganan,
Support.
Councilor Jonker,
support.
Councilor Rayner,
Or
Councilor Riley. Oh, sorry, I already did you. Sorry, Councilor Chambetta,
Support.
Mayor Balsma.
In favor.
The vote is 6-1 carried.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your participation, for your input, council staff, and that brings us to the end of our 2021 budget process. And we have time for a nightly coffee. So with that, I'd like to move to adjourn this meeting at the hour of 8:01. Thank you and have a good evening.
I'll second it.
There we go.